Everyone's been hearing whispers about HR38 and nationwide reciprocity, but almost nobody is saying the scary part out loud. Something unusual is unfolding in Washington, and even people who watch Congress for a living didn't expect the timing. For more than 20 years, HR38 lived as an idea, a debate, a talking point, something politicians could mention, fundraise on, and then ignore. And then, almost overnight, Congress moved it forward with a speed that caught both supporters and critics off balance. This didn't happen because one headline went viral. It happened because pressure stacked up from every side until the old system couldn't hold anymore. If you carry, or you plan to carry, or you have family who travels with a firearm, hit subscribe right now, because what I'm about to explain could keep you from becoming the next normal person who turns into a headline just for crossing an invisible line. Here's why this suddenly moved. Truckers have been getting arrested for driving across borders they didn't even notice. Parents who carry legally at home are suddenly breaking rules 2 miles away because a city line or a state line changed the rules. Federal judges are openly saying the current system burdens constitutional rights. Yet they also claim their hands are tied because the law is a patchwork and they can't fix it from the bench. Meanwhile, 24 state attorneys general, top law enforcement voices in nearly half the country, told Congress the patchwork is beyond repair. Add a Supreme Court that's been taking a stronger stance on the Second Amendment, and a political climate where millions of gun owners want clarity instead of confusion, and Congress didn't choose to rewrite pistol rules. They got forced into it by reality. That's why H.R. 38 is now impossible to ignore. And then the moment H.R. 38 hit the floor, the entire political landscape jolted like someone pulled a fire alarm. The shockwave didn't start with paperwork. It started with power. When former President Trump publicly backed nationwide reciprocity, every reporter, lawmaker, and legal analyst in Washington understood the conversation had shifted instantly. His support didn't just shine a light on H.R. 38. It shoved it into the center of the national fight. Suddenly, millions of gun owners who've been dealing with border traps and confusing reciprocity maps heard a clear message. This isn't a maybe someday issue. It's a priority. And right behind that came the Judiciary Committee vote, 18-9. That wasn't symbolic. That was movement, the kind of movement that forces Congress to react instead of stall. Then came the letter that rattled the holdouts. 24 attorneys general, the highest law enforcement officers in nearly half the country, telling Congress the system is broken. That kind of unified pressure does not happen by accident. It happens when states are tired of watching innocent carriers get hit with charges because of invisible lines on a map. So if you're thinking, okay, politics is politics, here's the part that actually hits your life. The rules, 10 of them. Each one is built to erase a trap, close a loophole, or force states to stop treating your rights like a patchwork gamble. And I'm going to keep this simple, 8th grade simple, because you shouldn't need a law degree to avoid a felony. Rule number 1 is the rule that ends the game of interstate roulette. Under H.R. 38, the permit in your wallet doesn't shrink when you cross a border. It grows. It becomes your nationwide credential in any state that allows concealed carry. No more pulling over at a gas station to stare at reciprocity charts. No more fear that one wrong turn makes you illegal. One permit finally treated like one right. Real-life example. A lawful carrier driving from Pennsylvania into a neighboring state shouldn't have to stop on the shoulder just to Google, does my permit work here? Rule number 2 is for constitutional carry states. And this is where people feel like someone finally fixed the glitch. Right now, your freedom can end the moment your tires cross a line on a map. Under this rule, it doesn't pause or disappear. You keep your home state status while traveling, and you're not treated like a stranger to your own rights. The idea is simple. If your state trusts you enough to carry without paperwork, another state shouldn't act like you suddenly became irresponsible at the border. Real-life example, a resident of a constitutional carry state shouldn't become paperwork criminal just because they crossed into a state that loves forms. Rule number 3 is the rule that changes traffic stops back into traffic stops. Anyone who travels knows this tension. One officer who doesn't recognize your permit can turn a normal stop into a roadside legal exam. H.R. 38 forces a uniform standard. If your permit is valid at home, officers in every state must treat it as legitimate. Not maybe. Not, I don't accept that here. Legitimate. That reduces confusion and reduces escalation. Real-life example. A truck driver pulled over for a brake light shouldn't end up in handcuffs because the officer doesn't like out-of-state permits. Now here's the cliffhanger. Most people think the biggest danger is, will I be allowed to carry? But the next set of rules is about what happens if a prosecutor tries to make you prove your innocence. H.R. 38 flips that pressure. Rule number 4 builds a defensive wall for lawful carriers. Under the old system, if another state questioned your permit, the burden fell on you instantly. Explain everything, prove everything, defend everything. H.R. 38 flips that dynamic. If a prosecutor wants to challenge you, they must prove you were not qualified to carry. not suggest, not speculate. Prove. That shuts down lazy assumptions and bad faith prosecutions. Real life example, a lawful carrier shouldn't have to prove their life story in court just because a local prosecutor doesn't like reciprocity. Rule number 5 changes behavior faster than speeches ever could. Money. Under the old system, if you were wrongly arrested while carrying legally, you paid the price. Lawyers, missed work, court dates, stress. HR38 rewires that. If law enforcement arrests a lawful carrier incorrectly, the agency has to pay for the fallout. Court costs, legal bills, the dollars spent proving the arrest never should have happened. When wrongful arrests hit budgets, culture changes. Real life example. If an officer arrests a lawful permit holder and the case collapses, the carrier shouldn't go broke just to get their life back. Rule number 6 crushes one of the worst traps gun owners never agreed to, becoming a felon without changing anything except location. Under this rule, your legal status doesn't reset when the pavement changes color or a welcome sign flashes past your windshield. If your home state authorizes you, that status stays with you while you travel, and states can't weaponize invisible borders against responsible people. Real life example, a family road trip shouldn't turn into a felony because the GPS rerouted you through the wrong state. Now, a quick mid-video checkpoint. If you're still watching, you're already ahead of most people. Hit like so this reaches the gun owners who don't even know they're at risk. Because the next rules are where people get confused. Private property, federal zones, and what nationwide really means. Rule number 7 draws a clean line about private property. Even with nationwide permit recognition, HR38 does not bulldoze property owners. Businesses and homeowners still decide their carry policies. What HR38 stops is the sneaky tactic where some states twist private property rules into citywide bans, expecting carriers to magically know rules that were never clearly posted. This rule returns authority to the actual property owner while stopping states from turning private property into a backdoor gun ban loophole. Real life example, a carrier shouldn't be charged because a city quietly treated private property like an unposted automatic no-carry zone everywhere. Rule number 8 is the guardrail. Federal gun-free zones remain untouched. Post offices, federal buildings, courthouses, and other federal protected zones stay exactly the same. HR 38 doesn't override federal authority. This rule matters because it prevents expensive mistakes. People thinking nationwide means everywhere. It doesn't. Federal law is still a separate layer. Real life example, a lawful carrier still can't walk into a federal courthouse thinking reciprocity makes it okay. Rule number 9 is the backbone rule. It destroys the idea that your permit becomes fake the moment you leave your home state. HR 38 forces states to treat your home state qualification as valid. Period. They don't have to copy your training system. They don't have to adopt your process, but they can't pretend it doesn't exist. This ends the nightmare where gun owners memorize which states respect them and which states act like their permit is invisible. Real life example. A permit holder shouldn't have to maintain a spreadsheet just to know whether they're legal at the next exit. Rule number 10 is the history rule, and it's the one opponents struggle to answer. HR 38 pulls strength from American history, including the 1887 New Mexico territorial law that openly protected the right of travelers to carry firearms for self-defense while moving from place to place. That wasn't a loophole. That was how armed travel was understood in a country where people crossed long distances with real danger and limited protection. Rule number 10 forces states to recognize that foundation and protects modern travelers from losing their rights just for being on the move. Self-defense is not tied to geography. It follows the person. Real-life example, a traveler shouldn't lose the ability to defend themselves just because they're passing through unfamiliar territory late at night. If those rules sound dramatic, it's only because the real stories behind them are worse. Nothing exposes the broken system like watching normal people get crushed by border traps. Take Shania Allen, a working mom from Pennsylvania. She passed checks, held a valid permit, and carried responsibly. Then she crossed into New Jersey for a birthday party, and everything changed. One honest sentence during a traffic stop pushed her into felony charges that threatened her job, her freedom, her future. Her crime wasn't violence or recklessness. It was crossing a border. Real-life example. Imagine telling your kids you might lose your job because you went to a birthday party in the wrong state. Then you have the long-haul truckers, men like David McCoy and Jeffrey Johnson, who live on the road, often through dangerous areas. Their permits were valid at home but worthless the moment their route passed into Minnesota. A rulebook written decades ago left them legally exposed for doing their jobs. These aren't technical glitches. They're traps that ordinary Americans fall into every year. Real-life example. A trucker delivering freight shouldn't have to choose between personal safety and avoiding prison. Now, whenever national reciprocity comes up, critics repeat the same talking points like, nobody has checked them in years. The loudest is states' rights. They insist each state should control who carries inside its borders. But notice something. People don't make this claim about driver's licenses, marriages, vehicle registrations, or professional credentials. Those move across state lines without panic. The moment it's self-defense, suddenly the rules change. Another claim is some permits are too weak. But the reference point people keep repeating is that permit holders are among the most law-abiding groups, with conviction rates far below the general public and even lower than many professional groups. And then there's the vague safety warning. Yet the argument here is that confusion and border traps punish ordinary citizens without stopping criminals. If you want the strongest foundation behind HR38, you look at history. For much of early America, travelers weren't restricted more than residents. In many ways, they were given more freedom because travel carried real risk. The 1887 New Mexico territorial law protected a traveler's right to carry on the road. And here's a key point the reference script highlights. Modern permit systems didn't even exist until 1911, more than a century after the Second Amendment. So when states claim modern restrictions are tradition, the historical record points the other way. Under the current legal test, history isn't a suggestion, it's the scoreboard. And that scoreboard favors nationwide carry. Law enforcement groups have raised concerns too, especially about traffic stops and verifying out-of-state permits quickly. The International Association of Chiefs of Police has argued it could confuse officers. But modern patrol cars already check out-of-state plates, warrants, and alerts in seconds. If a system can verify a vehicle registered 200 miles away, the argument goes it can verify a carry permit too. The real worry isn't technology, it's clarity under pressure. Different permit formats, expiration layouts, and training expectations can create hesitation. HR38 aims to create a unified baseline so officers know what they're looking at instead of guessing. Real-life example, a calm stop can turn tense fast if an officer hesitates because they don't recognize the permit format. And now here's the next cliffhanger. Even if HR38 moves forward, not everyone will accept it quietly. Several blue states are already gearing up for resistance, not loud, but legal. Attorneys General in New York, California, New Jersey, and Massachusetts are drafting challenges aimed at slowing or blocking HR38 the moment it becomes law. Expect lawsuits claiming state sovereignty and enforcement conflicts, plus rushed attempts to tighten local restrictions. They may stall parts of rollout, but the nationwide shift is already underway. So what's the timing? The argument is that HR38 isn't gaining traction by luck. The window is pushing it forward. With Republicans holding strong influence in Congress and some moderate Democrats quietly signaling they won't die on this hill, the math lines up in a way it didn't years ago. Add a Supreme Court that has shown a strict reading of the Second Amendment, and political momentum and judicial momentum are pointing in the same direction. Many lawmakers see 2025 and 2026 as the years when nationwide carry becomes not just popular but expected. The country is tired of the patchwork. Now the practical part. These rules aren't far off theory. They're already shaping how gun owners travel and prepare heading from December into 2026. If you've got a valid permit, this signals a future where crossing a border no longer feels like stepping into a minefield. If you live in a constitutional carry state, the path toward nationwide recognition is clearer than ever. If you worry about mismatched state laws, these protections start closing gaps one by one. This is the moment to update your understanding and get ahead. And the ripple effects are already showing. Manufacturers ramping up carry pistol production, holster companies expanding inventory, sheriffs in Pro-2A states updating guidance so deputies know how to handle out-of-state permits and carriers, especially truckers and frequent travelers, adjusting routes and training for a world where their permit finally works wherever they go. So here's my closing ask. Don't just watch this shift happen. Be prepared for it. Hit subscribe, because as HR38 moves, the details will matter. Drop a comment. What state are you in, and do you support nationwide reciprocity? And share this with one responsible gun owner you care about, because the patchwork doesn't punish criminals the most. It punishes the person who thought they were following the rules until the map changed.